Listen closely. The moment you become emotionally invested in the game begins to own you. The moment you crave outcomes, approval, revenge, or victory, you surrender leverage. Most men never notice this trap because they are too busy chasing, proving, and reacting. They call it passion. They call it love. They call it ambition. But very often, it is exposure. Niccolo Machiavelli understood something brutal and timeless. Hunger reveals weakness. Detachment creates fear. The man who wants too much becomes predictable. The man who needs too much becomes readable. The man who reacts too fast becomes easy to move. But the man who appears calm, measured, almost uninterested, he becomes difficult to decode. And the unreadable man controls the board without raising his voice. That is the paradox. When you stop clinging to the game emotionally, you gain strategic power over it. You stop leaking your energy into people, outcomes, and battles that were never guaranteed. You stop explaining your intentions to the room. You stop begging life to go your way. You act with precision, not hope, not panic, not noise. And at the end of this video, you will learn the rules that make a man harder to manipulate, harder to read, and much harder to defeat. If this already hits something in you, comment, "I move quietly," and stay with me, because what comes next is not motivation, it is reprogramming. The rules of quiet power. Before we dive in, I want you to subscribe to Victory Loop, because this is the moment you become dangerously unbreakable. This video will teach you 6 hard rules. How to hide your hunger before it gets used against you. How to stop explaining yourself into weakness. How to let people underestimate you without correcting them. How to strike once, not 10 times in panic. How to leave emotional traps before they turn into identity. And how to rule quietly without shouting, begging, or broadcasting every move. Most people lose before the battle starts, not because they are weak, because they are too visible. Their need is visible, their fear is visible, their anger is visible, their desperation is visible. And once people can read your needs, they can guide your behavior. That is what makes this dangerous. Because this does not only apply to politics, it applies to money, to relationships, to status, to business, to self-worth. A man can lose his edge in a boardroom because he wants the deal too badly. He can lose his peace in a relationship because he wants the person too badly. He can lose his dignity in public because he wants to be understood too badly. So stay locked in, because the men who win the quiet game do not always look strongest at first. They just understand one thing the loud ones never do. Need is the first chain. If you've ever lost power because you wanted something too badly, this video is about that exact trap. Most men never see the moment their desire becomes the leash around their neck. Watch to the end, and you'll learn the rules that make you harder to read, harder to bait, and much harder to control. And if you've ever felt yourself chasing, overreacting, over-explaining, or losing peace because you cared too much about a result, subscribe and turn on notifications now, because this video will show you how to stop bleeding power into outcomes and start moving like a man who cannot be easily played. Let's begin with the first rule. Never let your hunger walk into the room before you do. That sounds simple. It is not. Because most people are not destroyed by weakness, they are destroyed by visible wanting. Think about the man who wants the job too badly. He speaks too much in the interview. He laughs too hard at weak jokes. He agrees too fast. He tells them how badly he needs the chance. He thinks he is showing passion, but what he is really showing is dependency. And dependency lowers value. The same thing happens in love. The man who wants her answer right now, wants her validation right now, wants certainty right now, starts leaking himself. He texts too much, explains too much, pushes too hard. He thinks intensity proves seriousness, but often intensity without control only proves fear. This is why Machiavelli's psychology matters. He saw that men are moved by interests, appetites, fear, and appearance. He knew that once your appetite becomes obvious, your opponent no longer has to guess. He can wait, he can bait, he can raise the price. A hungry man is easy to tax. Let me give you a story. A man went to a farm to buy one tree, just one. It was straight, tall, and perfect for the house he wanted to build. The farmer asked him, "Why that tree?" The man smiled and told the truth. He said, "Because I need it. My roof must be finished this week. I have workers waiting." The farmer looked at the tree, then looked back at the man. The price doubled. Why? Because the moment the farmer felt the man's need, the deal was no longer about wood. It became about leverage. That is life. People hear your hunger in your tone. They see it in your timing. They feel it in your eyes. And once they feel it, the game changes. This is why the first chain is hunger. Not because wanting is evil, because unmanaged wanting makes you negotiable. You start compromising too early. You start accepting less. You start letting disrespect in just to avoid losing the outcome. That's how men get trapped in bad jobs, bad deals, bad relationships, bad friendships, bad identities. Not because they never saw the red flags, because they wanted the win too much to walk away. This is where most advice gets weak. It tells you, don't care what people think. That's lazy advice. It sounds strong, but it teaches nothing. The real lesson is deeper. Care about the mission. Do not become owned by the result. Care about the standard. Do not become needy for the applause. Care about the move. Do not worship the outcome. That is different. When you can hold desire without advertising it, you become dangerous. You can negotiate. You can observe. You can wait. You can leave. And the ability to leave is power. A man who cannot leave is already half-controlled. So if you want to start playing this game better, stop announcing what you need. Stop explaining your urgency. Stop presenting your craving as honesty. Honesty is not always wisdom. Sometimes it is just leakage. Control does not mean you feel nothing. It means your feelings do not get to sit at the head of the table. That is rule 1. Hide your hunger. If you've ever lost power because you wanted something too badly, comment "no hunger." Subscribe and turn on notifications, because the next part is where this gets colder. Remember this, the loudest need in the room is usually the cheapest one. The man who can wait without shaking already owns more of the board than he looks like he does. And in the next part, I'm going to show you why your mouth often betrays your power before your enemies ever touch you, and why too much honesty can make you easy to map. Here is the second rule. Do not reveal your whole hand. Most men think betrayal comes from enemies. A lot of it comes from their own mouth. They tell people what they plan to do too early. They tell people what hurts them too clearly. They tell people what they fear, what they want, what they are building, what they hope will happen, and they call that transparency. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it is just a map for the wrong people. A man who tells everyone his next move is not brave. He is often insecure. He wants witnesses before he has results. He wants early applause because the work itself still feels lonely. That need makes him exposed. Niccolo Machiavelli would understand this fast. Not because he hated the truth, because he understood the sequence. There is a difference between truth and timing. You do not owe every room your inner blueprint. You do not owe every person the full architecture of your ambition. You do not owe every conversation your full emotional weather report. Some truths protect you when spoken. Some truths weaken you when spoken too early. Let me make it real. A young man starts a business. He's excited. He tells his friends the full plan, the name, the product, the price, the date, the fear, the doubt, the dream. They nod. Some clap. Some smile. A month later, one friend starts asking strange questions. Another starts moving weird. One goes quiet. One copies the idea badly. One jokes about it every time the room gets full. Now the young man is confused. He thought sharing would build support, but he forgot one dark truth. Not everyone who receives your vision can carry it cleanly. Some people turn your dream into gossip. Some turn it into comparison. Some turn it into competition. Some turn it into silent pressure that makes you doubt your own pace. This is why guardedness is not paranoia, it is protection. And it is not only about goals, it is about wounds too. A man tells the wrong woman exactly what broke him in the past. A man tells the wrong friend exactly what he fears most. A man tells the wrong boss exactly how badly he needs the raise. Months later, in the heat of tension, those truths come back wearing different clothes. Now they are used to corner him, to rush him, to test him, to measure how desperate he still is. That is what people forget. Information does not stay neutral in the wrong hands. This does not mean become fake. It means become selective. It means understand that every truth has a cost depending on who hears it and when. And here is the part that scares people. When you stop oversharing, some people will call you distant, cold, hard to read, changed. Good. That often means they were living too close to your inner room. There is nothing noble about being easy to access, not emotionally, not strategically, not socially. A locked room is not always a wounded room. Sometimes it is just a room with value in it. You must learn the difference between intimacy and exposure, between honesty and leakage, between connection and surrender. The man who speaks less does not always know less. Very often he understands consequence better. And that matters, because if rule 1 is to hide your hunger, rule 2 is to hide your whole hand. You do not need to lie every time. You do not need to perform mystery like a clown. You just need discipline. Say less, show less, finish more. Let outcomes speak before explanations do. That is harder, but it is cleaner. If you've ever told the wrong person too much and paid for it later, comment less talk. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because the next part is where you learn why underestimation can become cover and why being overlooked can actually become advantage. A sealed letter keeps its power. An opened letter belongs to every eye in the room. Guard your words the same way you would guard your money. In the next part, I'm going to show you why looking smaller than you are can be smarter than looking impressive too early, and why the need to be recognized fast often ruins the quiet men who were about to win. Now we enter the title. Rule number 3, play weak. Play weak. This is where weak minds get confused. They hear this and think it means be fake, act pathetic, beg for sympathy. No. Playing weak is not shrinking your value. It is refusing to advertise your full force before the right time. It is strategic understatement. A lot of men lose because they cannot resist being recognized. They want the room to know they are smart, strong, connected, prepared, dangerous. So they perform power before they possess control. That is a beginner's mistake. The room that fully sees you too early begins preparing you too early. That is why underestimation can be a shield. Think of the man in the meeting who already knows the weakness in the deal but lets everyone talk first. He is not quiet because he is lost. He is quiet because he is measuring. He wants to know who is rushing, who is lying, who is emotional, who is bluffing. The loud men think they are leading, but really, they are revealing. This is one of the darkest truths in social life. People relax around what they think is not a threat. They leak around it. They gossip around it. They posture around it. They expose habits around it. The man who needs to look powerful right now loses that advantage. Let me tell you a story. There was a worker in a small yard where men cut wood all day. One man bragged constantly. He boasted about his strength, his speed, the number of trees he could cut before sunset. Another man barely spoke. The loud one laughed at him, called him slow, called him soft, called him dead weight. But the quiet one watched everything. He watched which trees cracked easiest, which men got tired first, which blades went dull fastest, which foreman respected results over noise. Weeks passed. Then pay changed. The foreman gave the bigger work to the quiet man. Why? Because while the loud one was busy proving, the quiet one was learning the ground. That is the rule. Noise steals observation. Ego steals timing. And if you do not understand timing, you will use your strength at the wrong moment and call the result bad luck. No. It was poor sequence. Machiavelli's lane is hard because it forces you to stop worshiping appearances in the shallow way. Yes, appearance matters, but not the way weak men use it. Weak men use appearance to impress. Strong men use appearance to misdirect. That is a major difference. Sometimes the strongest move is to look less urgent than you feel, less informed than you are, less offended than you could be, less interested than they expect. Because the room you do not activate too early gives you more room to study. And study is power. Now, listen carefully. Playing weak is not for men with broken self-worth. Those men will confuse restraint with fear. This only works if you know exactly who you are and exactly what you can do. Otherwise, you are not playing weak, you're just weak. That is why self-command comes first. A calm face with panic inside it is not strategy. That will crack. But a calm face with discipline inside it, that becomes difficult to move. And when people cannot move you emotionally, they begin guessing. When they begin guessing, you gain time. When you gain time, you gain options. And options are power. So yes, let them underestimate you. Let them think you didn't notice. Let them think you are not ready. Let them think you are less dangerous than you are. Just don't believe it yourself. If you're done performing strength for rooms that haven't earned your full hand, comment "Quiet Edge." Subscribe and turn on notifications because the next part is where silence ends and action begins. And that is where weak men usually ruin everything. The seed that screams never becomes a tree. The root grows in silence first. That is why depth always looks slow to shallow eyes. In the next part, I'll show you why timing matters more than force, why 10 weak moves create contempt, and why one clean move changes more than months of emotional struggle.
Here is the fourth rule. When you finally move, move once with weight, not 10 times in panic, not every day with a new mood, not with dramatic speeches and emotional debris all over the floor. Strike hard. This is not about violence, it is about decisiveness. Weak men think action means activity. Strong men know action means effect. A man who keeps warning people without consequence becomes background noise. A man who keeps announcing boundaries he never enforces becomes a joke. A man who keeps threatening to leave but never leaves trains the room to stop respecting his words. This happens everywhere. In business, he says, "I'm done doing free work," then still does it. In love, he says, "I won't accept disrespect," then stays after the third insult. In family, he says, "I need space," then returns every time guilt knocks. That is not mercy, that is self-erosion. Every weak move teaches people your edge is decorative. Let me give you the farm story. A man went out to cut a tree that had leaned too far over his field. For months he had complained about it. It blocked the light, its roots drank too much water, its shadow killed the smaller plants. Every week he hit it once or twice with a dull axe. Then he stopped, then he cursed, then he came back and hit it again. The tree stood there like it was listening to a joke. An old man passing by watched him for a while and said, "You are not cutting that tree, you are entertaining it." The young man got angry. He swung harder. Still, nothing changed. The old man took the axe, sharpened it in silence, studied the angle, picked one side, and struck with depth. Not everywhere, one place. Again, again. Then the tree moved. That is power. Not random force, directed force. A lot of men do not need more effort. They need a sharper edge and a chosen point. This is why Rule 4 matters so much. Your strike must be clean, specific, thought through, and timed. That might mean one hard no, one clear invoice, one change in access, one withdrawal of availability, one serious consequence, one move that resets the pattern. Do not confuse kindness with endless patience. Do not confuse intelligence with endless analysis. Do not confuse control with endless delay. There comes a moment where delay becomes disrespect toward your own life. Machiavelli understood necessity. He knew some moments do not ask what feels comfortable. They ask what secures the position. That is the real lesson here. A man who can never strike hard is not peaceful. He is often trapped by his own softness. And trapped softness invites testing. People keep pushing what keeps bending. That is why some men are always in the same loop. Not because fate hates them, because their consequences never arrive. They speak, they warn, they explain, they negotiate their own pain. They hope the tree will fall from conversation. It won't. Some things only move when you act with finality. So if you're going to make a move, make it count. Do not scatter your force. Do not leak it across 20 emotional reactions. Choose the point. Sharpen the edge. Move once. That is Rule 4. If you're done making empty warnings and ready for clean action, comment "one clean move." Subscribe and turn on notifications because the next part is where you learn why the loudest winners often lose their position and why ruling quietly is stronger than chasing visible dominance. A dull blade loves drama. A sharp blade loves accuracy. Most people do not need more heat. They need more edge. In the next part, I'm going to show you why real command does not beg to be seen, why noise attracts resistance, and why the men who rule quietly often keep power longer.
We come to the fifth rule: quiet rule. This is where the ego gets killed. Because most people do not want power. They want the feeling of being seen as powerful. That is why they overpost, overspeak, over-explain, over-display, over-threaten, over-celebrate, over-correct. They cannot let the room discover their force naturally. They need to broadcast it. And the moment you need the audience that much, the audience owns part of you. Quiet rule is different. Quiet rule changes the structure, not just the sound. It changes access, expectations, standards, consequences, distance, timing. A loud man says, "Respect me." A quiet man moves in a way that makes disrespect expensive. That is the difference. This is why the obsession with looking strong is childish. Real strength does not need to repeat itself all day. It appears in pattern, not performance. A boss who keeps shouting authority often does not have it. A man who keeps saying, "I'm the prize," often does not believe it. A person who constantly announces detachment is usually still attached. Quiet rule removes the need to convince. You just move differently. Let me make it practical. Instead of telling everyone you are serious, shorten your replies. Instead of warning everyone you will not tolerate disrespect, stop granting access where disrespect lives. Instead of posting every move, finish more of them in silence. Instead of fighting to be understood, let changed behavior do the talking. That is why silence scares weak people. Silence takes away their material. They cannot argue with your speech if you did not give one. They cannot twist your explanation if you did not provide it. They cannot easily measure your hunger if you stopped leaking it. Quiet rule does not mean passive, it means intentional. And there is another layer to this. When you move quietly, you protect your nervous system, you protect your attention, you protect your momentum. Noise burns energy. Drama burns energy. Constant proving burns energy. Trying to manage how everyone sees you burns energy. That is why so many men look active but remain stuck. They spend more power on image management than on actual positioning. Machiavelli's shadow over this is simple. Control the conditions. Do not just argue inside them. That is what weak men miss. They get dragged into little battles because they never changed the board. The board stayed the same, only the speeches got longer. Quiet rule changes the board. A man who rules quietly becomes hard to provoke, hard to bait, hard to measure, hard to exhaust. And once a person becomes hard to exhaust, they become dangerous in a long game. That matters. Because life is a long game. If you waste yourself on every slight, every opinion, every challenge, every little emotional test, you will arrive at your bigger battles already tired. That is why rule quietly is not just a tactic, it is energy management. It is self-respect in motion. It is a disciplined refusal. You do not owe every challenge a response. You do not owe every fool a correction. You do not owe every room a performance. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is restructure the game and say less. If you're ready to stop performing power and start building it, comment, rule quietly. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because the final part is the deepest one, where all of this becomes inner law, and where detachment stops being a tactic and becomes identity. Thunder gets attention, gravity gets obedience. One is loud for a moment, the other shapes everything without begging to be noticed. In the final part, I'll show you why the end game is not domination over others, but self-command over your own need, and why untouchable men are built from detachment, not noise. This is the final rule. Master detachment. Not deadness, not laziness, not "I don't care about anything." That is fake detachment, and it usually hides disappointment. Real detachment is different. It means you can care deeply without becoming owned by what you care about. That is the final shape of power. Because until then, someone can still bait you with praise, with insult, with a delay, with silence, with temptation, with threat, with the possibility of loss. If your center still swings every time the board moves, then the board still owns part of you. That is why this whole video ends here. Not with the enemy, with you. A man who masters detachment becomes difficult to control because his value is no longer sitting in everybody else's hands. If they clap, good. If they doubt, fine. If the deal comes, he will assess it. If it leaves, he will survive it. If they stay, he remains whole. If they go, he remains himself. That is terrifying to manipulators, because manipulators live on visible need. They need your panic, your chasing, your need for closure, your need to be chosen, your need to be right in front of them. Take that away, and they lose most of their tools. This is the man your hook was pointing toward from the start. The man who does not react too fast. The man who does not explain every move. The man who does not rush to prove his value. The man who can leave, wait, observe, or act without begging the room for emotional permission. That man changes the temperature of every room he enters. And let's be honest, most men are not trained for that. They are trained for pursuit, for display, for reaction, for applause, for winning visibly. But visibility is not always victory. Sometimes visibility is bait. You post too early, they study you. You speak too early, they map you. You chase too hard, they price you. You react too fast, they guide you. That is why this final rule is so serious. Detachment is not just a mindset, it is a form of strategic insulation. It keeps your inner room from becoming public property. Here is the dark beauty of it. Once a man stops trying to control every outcome, he often becomes better at influencing outcomes. Because now he is not shaking, not rushing, not leaking, not acting from emotional debt. He can see. And once you can see, your choices improve. You notice manipulation sooner. You negotiate cleaner. You love with more dignity. You work with more precision. You walk away faster. You stop feeding weak patterns. You stop handing power to things that have not earned it. This does not make you colder than life. It makes you harder to colonize. That is the real gift. Untouchable men are not men nobody can hurt. They are men who are no longer easy to bait into self-betrayal. And once you reach that point, the whole game changes. Now let's close the loop. At the beginning, I told you the moment you become emotionally invested in the game begins to own you. Now you know the cure. Hide your hunger. Do not reveal your whole hand. Let underestimation become cover. Strike hard when it is time. Rule quietly. Master detachment. That is how you stop becoming easy to read. That is how you stop becoming easy to move. That is how a man becomes dangerous without becoming loud. If this video marked a shift in how you see power, comment, "I move without attachment." Subscribe and turn on notifications, because if you liked this, go watch the previous chapters in Dark Wisdom, especially You're Being Used, Machiavelli Knew the Cure, and They Smile, You Bleed, Outsmart Them. Those two show you how people get close, This one showed you how to stop being easy to play. The loud man wants the room. The disciplined man wants command over himself. One becomes entertainment, the other becomes hard to defeat.